stuff like that is really big. So that might be something to think about.
All right, let's go ahead and get started here.
Yeah.
Business of National Fellowships never stops. But thank you all for coming to our workshop on the Boren Awards. My name is Matt Kloppenstein. I'm a National Fellowships Coordinator, and I work mostly with graduate students. I'm joined here by a number of colleagues from our office with our director, Jen Bess, other National Fellowship Coordinators, Ethan Knight and Kendra Fatali, our administrative assistant, Kara Brown as well. And we also have one of the members of our campus committee here as well too. If you'd like to briefly introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, I'm Magda Stankowski. That's hi. I'm at the Department of Anthropology, and I work in Kazakhstan and Russia, among other places.
So we will talk a little bit more about the campus process, but there is a process, and we will have a committee that will help with preparing the applicants. We are also very fortunate to be joined by an alumna of our institution here, Anna Shepard, who I will show a little bit later via Zoom, who has done the Boren program and will be sharing a little bit about her experience in a couple places. And so we're very excited to be able to have her expertise as well here. But let's get started. We're going to go over a little bit about what the award covers, just to make sure everybody understands it, talk about what the application process looks like, and then explain what the campus process is going to look like for next steps for all of you going forward. I don't know why it's not changed. Oh. Okay. So just very baseline, making sure that everyone here is eligible to apply for the awards so that you don't have to spend the rest of your afternoon if you suddenly realize you can't. But basically, this is a program that requires U.S. citizenship, and this is about intensive foreign language study that is not in a country that speaks English or is Western Europe. So we will go over in greater detail. We'll share a map with some information about some of the preferred languages and countries there, but in general, this is not the program if you want to study German or Spanish, with the caveats, or French with another caveat. But these are about less commonly taught languages that have been identified as of significant interest to the United States government for issues of foreign policy and national security. This is a program that is very interested in people who are interested in working in the federal government and some of these issues there. So these are languages and parts of the world where there is a recognized need for expertise in the culture, and of course in the languages. And you need to be enrolled throughout the duration of the period you would be in here. So this is not something where if you graduate in December, you can continue with your Boren experience there. And you also cannot, if you're a dual citizen, be a citizen of the country that you intend to go to. So all of this is provided in greater detail on the Boren website, but just want to make that very clear at the beginning here. As I mentioned, the rationale behind the Boren Awards is about training American citizens with expertise in a variety of strategically significant languages and with regionally specific knowledge. And so a key criteria here has to deal with the relationship of country and language field of study to U.S. national security. Boren understands this in a very broad sense, and I will show you in a moment some of the different aspects of policy that Boren considers to be elements of national security, but this is going to be an important part of the argument you will be making in the application, that the language and the study program and your particular goals are significant to an issue related to U.S. national security. And just as a general tip, starting off here, they're not looking for an overview of foreign policy between the United States and a particular country. So this is about depth over breadth. Or yeah, here, let me make sure I said that right. They want you to demonstrate that you understand how what you are studying or what you're hoping to do with this shows a deep knowledge of a particular aspect of the national security dimension of this particular language, rather than trying to provide a comprehensive overview of every way in which, I don't know, say the United States and Jordan have strategic interests or something there. So it's about your academic goals and professional goals, And it's about showing that you can demonstrate an analytical understanding of a particular issue and its relationship to national security. When we get to the essays a little bit later, can emphasize this point again here, but that's just something to keep in mind. It's an important criteria for what Boren is looking for. And so I pulled up here a number of, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are just some of the areas that Boren identifies as key aspects of national security. So you can see this is more than just a strict military understanding of things. This involves things related to economics. This involves things related to telecommunications, the environment, public health. And that's why this is an award that is available to people across all sorts of different disciplines. And Boren is really interested in people from a variety of different disciplines. This isn't just for people who are interested in national security and kind of a strictly militarily understood sense of that. And so if you're trying to figure out how you might be able to explain what you're doing in relationship to this, you can think about these kind of broader categories here, which again doesn't encompass everything, but hopefully gives you a sense of the wider understanding of national security. When I use this term here, and then when Boren in their materials talks about what this means. So I should just maybe pause here for a second and say, are there any questions about this aspect of it, since this is important? Yes.
I have a question. When was this list compiled? I mean, is the list of what becomes kind of a national security criteria, does this change? Like, did it change from 2008 to now, or?
I don't know the history of how it has changed. Boren updates their materials like every year,
Okay.
and provides information there. So this is from the most current information that they have. So yes, national security is a constantly evolving concept, and so I imagine it has changed over time. But this is what they are currently describing it as.
What I would say too is, I think historically Boren tries not to actually define it. I mean, they give examples and ranges, but they want to see the applicant really explain and argue why what you're interested in is an issue of national security. So it is very open. They're trying to give some examples and show the breadth, but it is. So I think that's also why it's kind of wide ranging and changing.
Right. So if you can make a case that goes beyond any of these, you're not limited to these particular factors here. This is just meant to suggest the breadth of the category. That's it. That's a very good question. Another important criteria here has to do with public service. As hopefully was made clear with the email if you heard about this workshop here. This is a reward, or this is an award that requires a year-long commitment to working in the federal government, at least. And this is actually one of the ways in which Boren likes to talk about the award. They see this as a career preparation award, not as like a study abroad sort of thing. So this is really something for people who are interested in working in different aspects of the federal government. And we'll give an example of some of the different agencies that this might be the case. Again, this is not just for people who want to be in the Department of Defense or Department of State. This is understood very broadly. There are a lot of different ways in which you could potentially find a position that may be of interest with your career goals within the government. But since there is this commitment there, they are interested particularly in people who do see serving in the federal government as a longer career objective. There is just, again, a requirement for 1 year of service. So you are not required beyond that. But if this is an area that you're thinking about seriously for a career, then that would really help set you out as an applicant there. And with that, you can defer this if you are continuing in graduate programs as well too. So that's something to keep in mind. You're not immediately required to enter into a year of service for the federal government upon your return to the country. If you're still in the middle of your bachelor's degree, if you're planning on enrolling for an advanced graduate degree after that. So there is some flexibility about the time frame in which you're expected to complete this. But do be aware that that is something that is an expectation that if you accept the reward or the award, you are committing yourself to doing that at some point within some of these parameters. Yeah.
Okay, so I haven't seen any sorts of examples of what sort of service that they're looking out for. And do you know any?
Yeah, I mean, this is something we'll get to a little bit later, but there are a whole range of positions, and Boren actually on their website has a very detailed list of some of the different agencies and kind of the number of positions that people who have done Boren might be eligible to apply for. So that's a really good question, but let's come back to that in a little bit because that is an important one and we want to make clear on. Then the last kind of, or the next current piece of criteria that Boren is interested in is showing your seriousness and commitment to language study. Again, this is about intensive language study. And the programs that Boren provides and the ones you have the opportunity potentially to create really need to demonstrate that you are serious about making concrete, substantial goal improvements in your knowledge of a critical language here. And that your commitment to that language has already started in some way. That doesn't have to mean formal courses. In many cases, you may have difficulty finding a university course for that language, but showing some initiative that you've taken to at least familiarize yourself a little bit with it, and then also your plans for what you're going to do after that, that you have an intention to continuing to maintain and further develop your abilities in that language. And something else to keep in mind here is that with the exception of French and Spanish, which are ones that they only allow in certain circumstances there, none of the other languages for Boren require any sort of prior knowledge or proficiency. So you can be a total beginner in a language. That's fine. They're just interested in seeing that you are serious about the language, that you have a plan to keep working on it, that this fits into your career goals. You can explain that you can make that case about the national security components, and that you're able to set a realistic expectation for the amount of language skills you think you're going to be able to acquire during the course of the program. But again, you don't have to have extensive background, and you're not at a disadvantage for not having studied that language before. Any questions about this criteria? So Boren has two types of programs, and we'll start by talking about the flagship language initiatives. So these are programs that are done with partner institutions in the United States around certain areas, and we'll take a look at each of them in turn. You can see there's African language, Indonesian, South Asian, and Turkish. And then the other type of program are self-identified programs. These are ones that could be through an existing study abroad program or one that you are able to design as long as it meets certain criteria. So these are the kind of options for how you can use a Boren Award for language study and international experience. With the flagship language initiatives, these are programs that are through universities where you will be studying a language over the course of a summer. So the way these programs typically work is you will do summer study for a language, and then you will go to an overseas component during the fall. And what that looks like varies a little bit based on the institute there, but that's kind of the general pattern. As I said before, it's open to people at any levels. I know that Boren as an organization has emphasized that if you are a complete beginner in a language, this is often the way to go. If one of your languages, if one of the institutes covers a language they're interested in studying there, that beginners are often more successful in applying there because of the way that they review applications for the flagship language initiatives. It's just limited to the people applying for that particular program instead of the broader pool. So that's something to keep in mind as well. You're not required to apply to one of these, but that your chances may be a little bit higher because the pool is not quite as broad as it's going to be otherwise. With the African Flagship Languages Initiative, this is through the University of Florida. So the summer component would be there. And then you can see options for what would be the case for where you could study overseas. So I mentioned that French was an exception. The only context in which you are allowed to study French is if you are doing that in order to gain more language and area study skills related to Africa, the Francophone parts of Africa. And so that's the program that's in Senegal. It does require you to be relatively advanced, they say intermediate or intermediate high or higher. And that's a program in Senegal. Otherwise, these are the other languages that are offered through this particular institute here. Any of the indigenous languages of Africa are eligible for Boren. They're not all offered through the AFLI, but this is not an exhaustive list of the languages you could study if you're interested in a different African language. Indonesian is another option for a flagship language initiative. This one's through the University of Wisconsin. And again, as was the case with all of these, you would start there with summer study and then transition to one of the sites available overseas. And it's also the case for these language initiatives that you can extend for the spring semester as well too. And there is a preference for longer programs that we'll get to a little bit later, but you have the option of trying to create a program that goes up to 52 weeks for a full year. And Boren is really interested in people who want to do longer periods of study. So if that's something that's of interest to you, then again, that's maybe another reason to think that this could be a good fit. South Asia, also through the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and this offers both Hindi and Urdu with a similar overseas component in the fall, an optional one in the spring. And I'm going to pause here, our slideshow, if I can get away from it, and
This is the program that Anna did.
bring in our very special guest. I'll step away.
You might be able to see everybody, otherwise she's staring at her computer.
Yeah, see if we can.
I'm gonna try and switch your camera, Anna, so that you can see the room.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. That's great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And maybe since this is the first time we're talking to you, tell us a little bit about your background, your experience here, and then share a little bit about the South Asian Language Institutes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated from the Honors College in 2020. I was a 2018 Boren Scholar to Lucknow, India for Urdu. I was in the, as he said, South Asian Flagship Language Initiative. 1 second, I'm just going to mute my computer because my voice is coming back to me and it's very disorienting. Yeah, so I was studying public health at USC. I knew since I was a freshman that I would want to go study abroad in South Asia at some point, but that's obviously a sort of daunting task for some people. And I knew I wanted to find a really structured program. That's something really awesome that the flagship initiatives of Boren provide because they have that structured summer program before you go abroad. Mine was 8 weeks long at, as he mentioned, University of Wisconsin-Madison. And you're surrounded by both the people that you're going to be studying abroad with and instructors who have been teaching past Boren scholars and fellows for years and can really prepare you for the environment that you're going into, the instructors that you'll be with overseas, what to expect from your host city. So that was a really awesome aspect of the component for me. And like was mentioned, that was an 8-week program. I went on to spend the fall of my junior year in Lucknow. I was the youngest person in my cohort. Everyone else were seniors who had graduated and then postponed their matriculation so that they could spend an extra semester or a year in India. A lot of people decide to do it later in their undergraduate program, and I would encourage anyone who wants to wait to apply or who maybe doesn't get in on the first round to consider reapplying later on because it fits in really well after an undergraduate program as well as in the middle of it, which was how I chose to do it. But the program in Lucknow was amazing. It was really immersive, lots of one-on-one time with professors and instructors. I saw language gains that I don't think I would have encountered in any other academic setting. And I really enjoyed the experience. I would recommend any of the flagship programs or any of the other Boren programs, of course, to anyone who's interested in learning a language. So I hope that this workshop really encourages some of y'all to submit your applications this round.
Does anyone have any questions for Anna, particularly about the Flagship Language Institutes? Yeah.
I was going to ask, do you think is your biggest takeaway or piece of advice you've had for people applying?
Biggest piece of advice.
I think I heard you, but you said my biggest takeaway for people applying.
piece of
Okay.
advice?
Okay. Well, for my biggest advice for the application process, I think it was touched on already, but specificity in your goals and tying together your field of study with your language and national security. I think that is what really makes your application the strongest. Like, for example, like I said, I was a public health major. And when I first looked at the Boren Awards, I didn't think that they were really going to be a good fit for me because I didn't think that I was interested in work with the Department of Defense. But what I wrote about in my essay was how, as a public health major, I was really interested in population level well-being and how that ties into work that is happening at USAID. And that was a way that I would like to fulfill my service, and that an interest in global well-being and population well-being ties into strong defense relationships or defense strategy. And I also, of course, spoke to how that related to the Urdu language and the South Asian region specifically. So anyway, looking at the specific aspects of what you're talking about, not trying to prove like a really general understanding of a region, just really honing in on what it is that you want career-wise out of the scholarship or fellowship, if there's any grad students, I think makes it a really strong application.
Great, thanks for that. We'll return to Anna a little bit later to hear more about her experiences, but it's so great to actually have someone here with us who can talk about what this looked like on the ground, and we'll be able to talk more about the federal service that she's involved in right now. So moving on, there's a Turkish flagship language initiative. This one is located in Azerbaijan, also through University of Wisconsin. So I won't go into detail because, again, the structure of the flagship language institutes are roughly the same, but just so that you're aware of the universities that are running them and the locations that they have there. So if you do not go the route of a flagship language institute, then the other option is a self-identified program. And this will depend on whether you're applying for the scholarship, which is for undergraduates, or the fellowship. Is anyone here a grad student? It's disappointing. Oh well. Not that it's bad to be an undergraduate. Just, that's the group that I get to work with. So, well,
I'm considering it for my grad school in the future. But
okay.
yeah, it doesn't fit with
Timing wise, yeah.
Well, I will count you as one of mine for the purposes of the workshop here. So, okay. So the fellowships are a little bit different for the graduate level. They allow you to pair academic study and research, whereas the scholarships are just about language study. And in this case, the self-identified programs are ones in which you can develop it either independently with the fellowships, or you can do as a scholarship something through a study abroad office or through third-party providers like the ones that IAE and others have identified. Trying to remember what comes. Yes, Jen.
Clarify just one thing. So the requirement for what the program has to entail, especially at the undergrad level, it has to have language study the entire time that you're abroad. It does not have to have exclusively language study. So if you find a study abroad program that lets you take history classes, poli-sci classes, and the intensive language courses, that's fine for Boren. You just have to have the language piece, the central component, but not purely that. Yeah.
So if you were to do that option, would it also cover the classes that aren't language based?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And the one kind of note of please.
Sorry to
Yes.
be a voice of God in the room, but I wanted to add that for the flagship initiative programs as well, I felt like it was going to be all language all the time, and it certainly was, but I had time, in addition to my language classes, to volunteer with the local women's shelter, which I thought was a really unique experience. And that was set up through my language institute. And as well, when you stay over for the spring, which I didn't do, but I had a lot of members of my cohort do, you're really able to do exactly what you want with, you need to have language in there as well. But at that point, you've built the relationships with the instructors, and they will fit in your language classes how you together decide is appropriate, and then also fit in whatever it is additionally you want to do. I had some people start research projects in my cohort, some similar volunteer activities. So just wanted to throw that in with the flagship program as well.
Thank you. That's great to know. The one kind of note of caution that Boren says about the programs you might find through study abroad is that sometimes they don't have as substantial of a language feature to it. So you do need to make sure that if you identify a program that there is a very significant language learning portion, that it's not a study abroad program where everything is being done just in English, or where the structure is not really focused on that. So you do have that option. There is that flexibility, but this is about intensive language learning. And so you'll be expected to demonstrate that you will be doing enough language study to justify the award and to achieve the kind of proficiency that you're going to be aiming for there. In terms of what you get, it depends on how long you go. And the program is available in essentially semester or year-long forms. There is a summer program that is just for people in STEM fields, 8 to 11 weeks. That's in recognition of the fact that oftentimes in STEM disciplines, it's difficult to fit in an extended period away from your program of study. And so, if that is your field, then you are welcome to take advantage of that, because Boren recognizes that there's need for people with specialized regional knowledge and language skills in these other disciplines that have academic programs that may make it difficult to step away from a semester or a full year. But for anyone who's not in one of those disciplines, then the options are 12 to 24 weeks, 25 to 52. Again, that's understood as essentially a semester or a year, how they break it down. And so the amount of money that's provided to you is going to be based on the length of the program. And then for the Boren Fellowships at the graduate level, there is the possibility to do some domestic language study prior to going abroad, and in which you can get up to $12,000 potentially for that. The total value of the award can't exceed $30,000 as a graduate student. So if you're going for 52 weeks, you would be capped at up to $5,000 worth of available funding for summer preparation. But that is an option as well too. You can do some domestic if you have identified that as a need to kind of get your proficiency to a certain level before you're ready to embark on the program that you've identified, then that's a possibility too. Yes. Please, everyone who has knowledge about Boren is welcome to.
Sure.
The voice of God, the voice of Jen, whoever.
And we need to do that more often. These are maximum awards. It doesn't mean that if you get the Boren, they're just going to give you $25,000. They look at the budget that you provide, and so it's up to that. But I would tell you the budget is not a consideration when they're choosing recipients. So they don't look at that until they decided, yes, you're someone that we want to send. Now, how much money do we need to give you? So don't try and lowball things just so they would give it to you because you think they're like, oh, they only have to give me $15,000. So just be honest about what the program is. But it is a sort of all-inclusive budget that they're looking at. So the courses, the travel, things like that.
Yeah, and here's some more information. No, this is a perfect transition. So these are the sort of things that you will be talking about in your budget. The air travel, tuition, lodging and food costs, local transportation. And then there are a few things that are not going to be covered as well. Any sort of fees in terms of getting a passport, or if you need to have any sort of vaccinations or other sort of medical things done in order to be authorized to travel there. There's also not support for dependents, if there are family members that you were hoping to accompany you on your Boren experience. And then this is also not for any sort of additional travel that you're hoping to do on the side. That's not something you can include in your budget there. But otherwise, it's very comprehensive. This covers essentially the cost of what it would take to be there, to participate in the program, and to live in the country that you're going to be in.
I'm going to ask Anna to clarify. So this is if you're doing an independent program. If you do the flagship language initiatives, it's just they cover everything. So you don't put in a budget. They'll tell you what to fill in on the application, but you don't have to do all of this. It's like you're applying to the program and they're funding it. Is that correct, Anna?
That's exactly right. And I remember filling out the application, and like Jen said, there's instructions on what to put in each box for the flagship. And it was saying like, just answer 0 for these different things. And I was like, oh, so are they not covering anything? And that's not how it works. They just want, it's very regimented, and they've made all of those decisions for you with the flagship portion, which I quite liked. But maybe you want to do a more self-designed program, and I think that's awesome too.
Yes, question.
Do the summer programs for STEM students fall under the umbrella of Flagship, or is that something that you have to find independently?
You have to find that independently, because the flagships are defined as the summer intensive in-country fall semester or what. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question though.
But you could look at the places like, where do the flagship language initiatives send people in the fall, and then see if you can find a program at one of those schools. I mean, so there's ways to kind of see, oh, Boren's vetted this, that might be a good place to go. How can I put that together? But you would talk really here with the Education Abroad office to help finalize a lot of that. Right?
Other questions about the program budget or the different program durations? So as I mentioned earlier, Boren really encourages applicants to identify longer periods of language study overseas. So in contrast to the kind of programs that most US students do when they travel abroad, you can see 2/3 of them are less than a semester in length, 11 weeks or fewer. Boren gives significant preference to people who propose programs that are in that 25 to 52 week range. So it is possible to apply for and receive shorter periods of funding there, but you can see that if you are interested in a longer period, that your odds are going to be significantly higher, because there's a strong preference for these longer types of programs there. Yes.
So okay, the US students abroad, is that just like
That's in general.
in general? Okay. But when I say for the Boren scholars, would these percentages change based off of your STEM major or not?
If you're a STEM major, you're applying that 4.3%.
Okay.
So that's right. Those are the only ones that are eligible for that. So,
Gotcha.
so yeah, less than 5% of them are for.
And 25 to 52, 25 weeks, right, is 6 months. So it's actually longer than a semester, which I think always freaks students out. But you can look at like a summer and a fall, or a spring and a summer. So you might need to find a program that's more extensive than a semester, that you can add on a little bit to mix up. Because it really, looking at that, it really is worth your while, both competitively, but also linguistically, to spend as much time in country as possible. So.
And that's, I mean, if this is a language you're trying to develop fluency in as well, this is a great opportunity, because a lot of programs are for shorter durations there. And this is one that does allow up to a full year. So that really is a great, I mean, you can see this as an asset as much as a hurdle to kind of overcome. But that is good to know as you're thinking about your applications. Yeah.
So if you apply as a freshman, and like, let's say I want to do like a gap year between my bachelor's and my master's, would I have to apply my senior year, or can I apply here and wait, or how would that work?
So you still need to be enrolled the entire duration of the award. So it would be
Matriculated. It's a weird word.
Yeah. So essentially in that situation, you could delay your graduation, having already fulfilled all of your requirements, not file to graduate. And then if you got the Boren Award, do that for a year, and then at the end of it, file to graduate. So for all intents and purposes, it would function as having done a gap year between bachelor's and master's, but you would still need to be technically considered a student and not having graduated during that time.
Okay.
So there are some ways to kind of work around that. We can, if that's your situation, we can kind of have that conversation, because we have had students here who have done that. But yeah, it is important to make sure that they are very clear on this point, that you have to actually be matriculated in that time. There is some flexibility. They do recognize sometimes people take a leave of absence. You can apply for it as a graduating senior who is applying for graduate school at the same time, and sort of say that you would do that in your first year, or as a graduate student. So there is some flexibility there, but as a general rule, only if there's a kind of extenuating circumstances there, do you have the possibility to not have that. So That's a good question though, because that is a situation that comes up.
To the other half of that question, so it's not something you can defer.
Okay.
So you'd apply,
And do the next year.
you apply in the cycle for do it the next year. That's generally speaking. I don't actually know what I'll do with COVID, so that changes some stuff too, but
Oh, and I should flag that as well too, where Boren has given us a little bit of language for COVID. They're saying that they're planning to run the program as normal. Can begin study as early as June 4th or as late 2022 or as late as March 1st, 2023, as in a normal application cycle. They state, quote, "It is likely that circumstances will require some 2022 awardees to postpone their study or select an alternate program or country. We cannot predict which countries will be cleared to travel in June 2022 and beyond. We'll continue to work flexibly with awardees to find suitable overseas alternatives." That's something that I'll mention later on there. They have a lot of flexibility about country. So if you had originally planned to do a program in one country for a language and for whatever reason, because of the COVID situation or something else, that you're not able to do that, they will give you a lot of flexibility in finding another program for that. But they are not going to let you defer the program entirely, barring some sort of very extraordinary situation. So that is, of course, the situation that we're dealing with, trying to figure out how COVID may or may not impact things next summer and in the following fall for when you're applying. And that fits in a little bit with country preferences here. The countries that are in blue are ones where Boren does not anticipate that they will be able to get you placed in there. So, for example, if you, like me, study Russian, they're not anticipating being able to place anyone in Russia, so you would need to propose look for a program in another country that would offer that, maybe in the Baltics or in Central Asia, where there are Russian-speaking populations. So if you were, I know that this is a room mostly of undergraduates, but for anyone who might be watching this later, this is more of an issue potentially for graduate students who may be hoping to pair this with research. So if your research is very country-specific, that's going to be something, if you're applying for this, that you're going to need to at least gesture to in your application to say that you have some flexibility in terms of what you're going to be able to do, because this is there's not a guarantee that you'll be able to go to a particular country. Boren will make every effort to make sure you can study that language somewhere, but if it's not possible for you to travel there, then you should be anticipating something else. And that's, again, the countries that are in blue are the ones that are the case there. The countries in green are the ones that they expect to be able to send you to.
Oh, so think about application cycle versus when you go. So this current application cycle and deadlines covers study abroad that starts as early as June, this coming summer, or say this March, right? And so there's a lot of uncertainty in the world in finding programs. So it requires you to identify a study abroad program that you would not yet have applied to. And so the application does ask, if you're not doing a flagship initiative program, you have a top choice, but you have a second choice within the application. And so that's where this comes into, is like, okay, they welcome you to put one of the blue countries as your first choice, but then your second choice really needs to be a green country option. And that's because they want to be flexible with you, but they need to see that you're also willing to be flexible.
Yes. In terms of the languages that are available, again, this is not necessarily an exhaustive list. You can try to make a case for something else. For Africa, again, any of the indigenous languages, not just the ones listed in the Flagship Institute, and then a whole host of other ones. As I mentioned before, French is only allowable if you were doing it as an African language. Spanish, if you looked at the map beforehand and saw the world there, you can see that there are countries in South America that are identified as priorities, even though Spanish is not a priority language. This is because there is need for regional expertise, but there is more, there are more Spanish-speaking, or people with Spanish-speaking skills already in federal service there. So if you want to go to one of those countries there, you really need to have very advanced level. And the kind of program you would propose would have to be fairly specialized. That's if you were interested in going to Argentina or something, then you're not going to want to say, I'm going to just enroll in a study abroad program or a language program. They want to see something more along the lines of, if you're doing research as a graduate student, that you're doing language study that's more specialized in that maybe you're doing an internship that's related to your field of study, where you'd be getting more specialized language instruction in an academic discipline, or that you're going to be taking courses that are going to be taught in that language. So that's the other exception, which I don't know if that applies to anyone here, but any of these other languages up here, again, you do not have to have had prior study. You're not at a disadvantage for having done that. Any questions about the kind of languages here? Just out of curiosity, what languages are any of you considering?
Mandarin. Yeah.
Mandarin? Yeah. Arabic.
Japanese and Korean.
Okay. So good. We have a nice assortment there. So there are also preferences for fields of study that are also quite broad. So this covers a whole range of things. So in regard to the summer programs, in terms of what they consider to be STEM disciplines and who is eligible to apply for that, those would be the ones on the left. But then again, there are other ones on the right as well too. These are preferences. So if you are not in one of these fields, you can still apply. And you'll kind of have to be, as you're making your application, making your case for why your field is, the training you're getting there going to be significant for that. So, and the same thing with languages, you can apply for languages that are not listed as preferred, but you're going to have to do a little extra legwork in terms of trying to demonstrate why you should be given this consideration for this particular language as well here. Yeah.
So if I were double majoring in a STEM field, but that weren't my primary major, how would they feel about that?
In terms of whether you'd be eligible to apply for the summer program?
Yes.
I'm not sure about double major. Do you know anything,
I think
Jen?
if you're majoring in it, I don't know that they care what else you're majoring in. Because the issue is that they see it as the STEM major would be restrictive on you in other ways,
Yeah.
right?
All right.
Yeah. Other questions about fields of study? So we mentioned that there is a federal service requirement that comes through this, and Boren, and we'll go to Anna here in a moment here to learn more a little bit about what that looks like for her. You are not placed in a job by Boren, so you do have to identify a position, but at the same time, you're not just kind of left to flail on your own within the giant labyrinth of the federal bureaucracy. If you've ever looked into applying for jobs there, it's quite the process. So the National Security Education Program provides some resources in terms of helping connect you to opportunities, in terms of giving you some consultation and advice, and alerting you to different kinds of opportunities. So you will be given some support in that process, but it will ultimately be up to you to identify and apply for a particular opportunity. And I think this would be a great time to go to Anna and ask about what that looked like when you returned from your Boren experience.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things to talk about because it has been such a huge resource both while I was in undergrad and after undergrad. So before you go on your time abroad and after you return, Boren sponsors a trip to DC for all of its scholars and fellows. The trip before is focused a lot on, safety abroad and meeting your cohort and things like that. When you return, that trip to DC is basically a huge networking weekend of helping you understand how to fulfill your service requirement. They talk about security clearances, which is obviously a huge part of getting a position in the federal government. They talk about Schedule A, which is a special hiring authority that you have as a Boren scholar or fellow. That is really crucial to fulfilling your federal service. It basically, there's a non-competitive hiring process, a very competitive hiring process that human resources managers in the federal government have to follow. And Schedule A hiring authority basically gives you a non-competitive authority similar to being a veteran or having a disability that allows the human resources manager to put your application sort of in front of everyone else's and consider it first without having to go through that whole complicated competitive process. So it's a huge advantage if you're interested in a federal career. There are really a limited number of pathways toward getting that Schedule A authority, and Boren is one of the main ones. So I attended the trip to DC following my return from India. That was right before my senior year of college. A lot of people use that trip, which includes a job fair, to secure their federal position. Since I still had a senior year, I kind of just use it as more of a learning opportunity about the process. They go over things like how to make your federal resume too, which is super useful because that is a whole different process of its own. It basically contradicts everything you learn in undergrad about making a resume. But you also have the opportunity to connect with the different federal agencies at the job fair. I know someone asked earlier about what different roles you can use to fulfill your service requirement. And that's really where I learned just how large the breadth of the roles are. There was everyone at the job fair from NASA to USAID, which is where I ended up fulfilling my service, or I'm going to be fulfilling my service requirement. I'll touch on that in a moment. But the State Department was there, the Department of Defense. I have a really close friend from my cohort who is currently working on the Afghanistan desk in the Department of Defense's Office of the Assistant Secretary, which is basically like a State Department within the Department of Defense. So she's like actively informing the policy that's going into the Afghanistan withdrawal right now, which is so exciting and something that Boren set her up incredibly well for. But that's sort of a more traditional way to fulfill the service requirement, since it is a role with the Department of Defense. I also have someone from my cohort working for the Department of Agriculture. I have someone working in the asylum office in Chicago. So there's a huge spectrum of different ways that you can fulfill your service requirement. I almost flinch before I say service requirement because they sort of drill into you when you go on the DC trip that it's more of a service opportunity. And I think that has turned out to be very true. As I touched on a moment ago, I'll be fulfilling my service opportunity in the Bureau for Humanitarian Affairs at USAID, which is a disaster response team within the agency. I'm going in as a program assistant, which is kind of perfect for me because I'm looking to start in a more entry-level role to help build my network in DC and figure out what I might want to do for grad school. But as I mentioned, for example, with my friend at the Afghanistan desk, you can also go straight from your Boren and into a career in the federal government as well, less of an entry-level role if that's what your internships have set you up for, or if you even want to delay your service until after you've completed grad school, that's completely fine. So your service opportunity is really what you make of it.
There are questions for Anna. It's so great to have someone here who's gone through this process. So this is a really good opportunity. If you do have questions about the service opportunity that you will have as a Boren Scholar or Fellow. Yes.
What were some other options that you looked at when looking for your service opportunity?
Yeah, totally. So I had a pretty, I don't want to say narrow idea of what I wanted to do, but I did want to stay in the public health world a little bit. So the other places that I was looking was as a refugee officer, which involves a lot of travel. You're flying to the different countries and interviewing refugees or refugee status applicants, adjudicating those applications and making a decision. That's a position that's at the GS9 level. So it's really more traditional to have a graduate degree going into that position, but it's definitely one that I would consider going to, or for example, if I had gone more on the track of going into grad school and then trying to use my Schedule A hiring authority, that would be a position that I would have chosen to revisit. I also looked at a position in the office of the Assistant Secretary to the Defense, which is where I said my friend works. They had openings at their South Asia desk as well. So similar to what she does at the Afghanistan desk, those positions are really research based. You're looking at policies, paying attention to news in the different countries. That's something where a Boren scholarship can really help you, because while traditionally those are more grad school level positions, the specification of your Boren year or Boren semester, where you've gotten that experience in country and that language experience that is not widely available in the US, can make you more eligible for those roles that are traditionally fulfilled by people without the same expertise as you, but with graduate degrees. I got very lucky. A lot of people spend about a year trying to find their service requirement, and USAID, the position that I'm going to there, is just exactly what I had in mind when I applied for Boren. And it had a huge hiring event around when I started looking for my position. And so I didn't actually end up applying to all that many positions or spending that long looking at the different positions. But so I don't have like the most options to present to you in terms of what I applied for, but and I'm sorry this is such a long answer, but one thing I do want to highlight is that you become a member of the nsep.org sort of database, and I get emails basically every day, if not every week, from them about job openings across departments that are for NSEP recipients only, meaning only people who have received the Boren and positions like it, or sorry, scholarships or fellowships similar to it. And those are also across a wide range of fields, lots of research analyst positions, immigration specialist positions. I see some recently a huge surge in IT positions. So there's really a very wide range.
Other questions for Anna? Yeah.
Sorry, I just have one more. I was curious, for the Schedule A hiring authority, does that count for just, is that just for the flagships, or is it also for the scholarships and for everything? Okay.
Yeah, that's for everything, which is awesome. And it lasts really until you fulfill your requirement, but you do have, I think, 2 years after you graduate from undergrad to fulfill your requirement, and then you can extend that a year, and then you can also go to grad school after those 3 years if you want, or you can go right to grad school. So you have time to find really the right position for you to use that hiring authority. And if any of you do go on to get a Boren scholarship or fellowship, I really recommend being really thoughtful about where you want to use that authority. I have seen some people sort of rush into the first federal position that was offered to them, and you only get one hiring authority. So you want to make sure that it's the right place for you, because it's such an amazing opportunity and a really great foot in the door for anyone interested in a federal career.
Great, thank you. I'm going to jump ahead here because I know we're getting close on our time. And for anybody who has some time, we can talk about some of the specific agencies. You can see some examples here. There's a question about that. You can find this information from Boren, but I want to say a couple of words about our campus process here, and then we can go back and talk about the essay requirements and things for anybody who wants a little more information there. But quickly, in terms of the deadlines here, these are the national deadlines for the Boren Scholarship. It's February 2nd. The fellowship, which is for graduate students, is on January 26th. And again, this is for study that will begin June 4th, sometime starting June 4th, 2022, or before March 1st, 2023. We have a campus process, though, because Boren wants you to meet with the committee. And so we are asking anyone who's interested in applying for Boren to complete our preliminary application by November 19th. I will show you a QR code in a moment here, but we can actually just pass this around too right now if you need to get going. Basically, this just sort of gives us your information and asks you for a little bit of information that just says that you are that you have thought a little bit about what you might do to complete the different essays that you're going to have to prepare there. So by the 19th, that's what we're hoping to be able to identify who is interested in applying here. And then we really strongly encourage you all to have a draft of your essays reviewed by one of us in National Fellowships at some point by the end of the semester, because we are going to organize campus committees shortly after we return to class for the start of the spring semester in January. And we want you to have your materials submitted by our campus deadline of January 10th, which allows us to organize meetings with our campus committee. You will get feedback from this meeting that will help you make final tweaks and adjustments to your application. And then that will take place the week of January 18th and allow you to submit by the national deadline. So there's plenty of time, but you should start now because you will have the winter holidays coming up, and we want to make sure that we can identify anyone who's interested so we can be sure to organize the necessary committee meetings for all of you here. And it's just great always to start early and get feedback, because going through a couple of rounds of revisions is oftentimes very helpful in clarifying your ideas and things there. So that is our process for applying for Boren. Again, the national application date is February 2nd for the scholarship, January 26th for the fellowship. In terms of next steps coming out of here, you can fill out the preliminary application, make an appointment to get feedback. We are again encouraging you by the end of the semester, but if you start early and want to do a couple rounds of feedback even before, that's even better. We are happy to meet with you. You can make appointments if you're an undergraduate, which everyone here is through Navigate. So you can go under involvement and engagement, look for National Fellowships Advising, and choose one of our names, and we're all great. So it's not a bad decision no matter what you do. And we will also be adding those of you who fill out the preliminary application, to our Blackboard group, where we have some additional resources, including some examples of successful applications from University of South Carolina students that can be useful in helping you think about how people have talked about the national security relevance of their area. I believe they changed the essay a little bit. I think some of the other ones. The second essay now has kind of 3 specific components you're supposed to talk about, which I can say a few words about for those of you who have time in a minute here, but you'll have access to see some of those examples. And we are always available to answer specific questions that you might have. You can email us or you can meet with us, and we will be happy to assist you as you work on Boren. Again, if you have, I don't know why this thing is still here. This is the QR code if you didn't get a chance to do it already for the application. And Boren also emphasizes that they are fast at responding to your requests. So if you have a question about eligibility, if you have a question about program of study or something, you can definitely reach out to them directly. They're very happy to get back to you. So please don't feel like that's not an option that's available to you as a student. It totally is. If you want to get in touch with me, that's my contact information. Otherwise, again, with the National Fellowship Scholar Programs Office, and you can make appointments with us through an EAB Navigate to get some personalized advising here. Are there questions about the campus process? Again, I'll go back if anybody wants to talk a little bit about what the 2 specific essays are, but I do want to make sure that everybody's kind of clear on what the next steps are if you're planning on applying. Okay. So if you need to leave, that's fine, but I will briefly talk about the 2 essays, which are kind of the heart of the application you're putting together. The first one is the national security argument. The second one is about preparation for study in terms of the language and in terms of your readiness to be overseas, and then also about your future career plans and preparation for government service. And just a couple notes about this. For the first one, as I mentioned before, and as Anna really emphasizes well too, this is where you're making a specific, detailed, focused argument that shows an analytical understanding of an issue. Again, we give you a broad sense of what that might mean there. This is a chance to show that you can articulate why it is that your area of study, it's important to have some of this knowledge there, and why there are issues related to national security that are connected with that. And again, it's much more important to be specific and to show some depth of understanding. Anything that you can do that shows some information that wouldn't necessarily be known by someone who's just kind of casually reading the news or something, anything that shows that you have taken the effort to learn more about a part of the world and about things that might be unfamiliar. I know I've heard from Boren representatives that anytime that they read something with the review committee that surprises them or that they learn about a country, that's always a great thing. So if you know something that most people don't, you aren't just going to find, just scanning the New York Times or something, that's a great sort of thing to include there. And it's also a chance to you to talk about your understanding of some of the government agencies that are involved in terms of what particular parts of the government have interests or involvement in projects in that part of the world as well too, and demonstrating some sense of the ways in which federal agencies interact with one another and have different sort of priorities and connections. So that's something to keep in mind for the first essay, the national security one. And then the second one is asking you to address 3 particular prompts, and I'll just read them here for you right now. You can address in an integrated essay, giving equal attention to each point. First is, think about a previous experience that has led to growth or a personal quality, reflect upon it and describe how it will assist you in preparing to spend significant time overseas, studying a critical foreign language and culture. So this is basically your suitability to step into foreign environments and do well there. Next, it's about how this country or language will help you achieve your career goals, including your plans to fulfill the federal service requirements, being specific. And then, as you will be committed to working for the federal government for at least 1 year, describe what makes your interest in federal service and what you will bring as a leader in the federal workforce. So something to keep in mind about this is that 2 of those 3 points touch on the federal service requirement there. I was recently looking at some info session that Boren put out. And the advice that was there for about the second one is to think of the second essay as a job interview. This is you sort of pitching yourself for how you are going to be an asset to the federal government or an agency in some place there. So 3 points there, you can address them in any sort of order. And that is going to be combining your preparation and ability to thrive in that environment there, and explain why this fits with your future career goals and how part of that future career goal involves some element of service in the federal government. So there are very detailed instructions on Boren's website, borenawards.org, on essays. So you can find a lot of information there. They don't make it a secret about what they're looking for. So please do spend some time investigating that. But this is just an overview of what you're going to be expected to write on. Any questions about this?
Are the essays the same for the grad fellowship?
Yeah, the essays or like the application is the same in terms of what you have to. I mean, the information you'll be inputting will be a little bit different, but you're not required to write like a different type of thing. Any other questions? Any last questions maybe for Anna while we are still here? I don't want to impose on your time, but if you have a minute here and if anyone has a question.
It's definitely no imposition to me. And if Jen or anyone wants to share my email with applicants, that's completely fine with me too. I'm happy to talk to anyone. If you just have something specifically you want to talk about with, maybe you're interested in SAFLI or filling the service requirement. And I love talking about Boren. So I did CLS as well. I did their virtual program, so I'm happy to talk about that with anyone too.
Thank you so much.
All right. Yes, thank you. Apologize for going a little bit long here. We just had so much to share, but it was an amazing opportunity to have somebody who can share very specifically about what this program is like, and encourage all of you to be in contact with us as you work on your applications. And if you know of other people who are not able to make it today, we will make this available as well too. So please, you can direct them to the National Fellowships Office, and we're happy to be in touch with them as well. But thanks for coming, and we look forward to working with you as you apply for Boren this year.
Thank you. And this will be on Blackboard, right? Presentation.
Eventually, yes.
Yes.
That's,
We'll send a follow-up email and then it'll have the YouTube link and then hopefully we'll all see that. Like, we'll make sure it's accessible.
yes.
Thank you, I appreciate
And
it.
if you feel like it, we have some stickers.
Sorry,
And some
you left and we got stickers.
And some flyers with more information about our office if you want something about how to get in contact with us as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will take a sticker.
Please do.
I actually had a few questions, not necessarily relating to foreign,
Sure.
but related to just language scholarships in general.
Okay.
Feel free to leave whenever you need to, Anna. I'll stop the
All
recording here
right,
in a second.
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much. This is great. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, totally. Anytime.
These are 2 weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
And then it's like, oh.
That's very nice.
Stop the
But I was
recording.
really curious about language scholarships